Sign it, Julian. You earn $400,000 a year building city skyscrapers. Stop acting like a cheap bastard in front of my investors. My brother Marcus shoved the leather bill tray across 16 melted candles, 5 empty champagne ice buckets, and a mountain of half-eaten dry-aged ribeye steaks. It slammed into my glass of sparkling water, sloshing liquid onto my tailored jacket. I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my voice. I reached down, flipped open the black padded binder, and looked at the total stamped at the bottom in crisp black ink. $14,680 for 26 people. Is there a problem, son? My father demanded from the head of the table, dabbing meat juice off his chin with a linen napkin. Your brother just secured a $10 million municipal development deal. The absolute least you can do is cover his celebration dinner without throwing a pathetic temper tantrum. Marcus grinned, leaning back in his leather chair and loosening his silk tie. He patted his jacket pocket, intentionally flashing a gold wristwatch he hadn't paid for. Relax, Dad. Julian is just looking for an audience. He likes playing the overworked martyr before he pulls out his corporate card. At the far end of the private dining room, Marcus's potential financial partners chuckled. My mother smiled smugly into her wine glass. My sister-in-law ordered another double shot of $70 cognac without even looking at the menu. They had been ordering like royalty for 3 straight hours. Oysters by the dozen, caviar tins that nobody finished, 3 bottles of vintage red wine that the head sommelier had to unlock from a glass vault. And now, all 26 set of eyes were locked onto me. Not with appreciation, not even with mild politeness, just pure, greasy expectation. The exact same look they had given me my entire adult life. I looked Marcus straight in the eye. I need to use the washroom, I said, my voice steady as stone. Marcus let out a loud, mocking bark of laughter. Take your time, big guy. Go cry in the mirror if it helps you swallow the check. A wave of laughter rippled down the table. My mother shook her head, muttering something about how money never bought class. My cousin took a video on her phone, snickering with her husband. I stood up, buttoned my suit coat, and walked out of the private room. I didn't go to the washroom. I walked directly past the polished walnut wine racks and straight to the host stand near the entrance of the Obsidian Steakhouse. The restaurant manager, a tall man in his late 40s named David with sharp eyes and an immaculate navy suit, was standing behind the marble counter reviewing reservations. He had personally checked on our table 3 times over the course of the evening, and both times I had caught the subtle, sympathetic look in his eyes. He knew exactly what kind of dynamic was playing out in that private room. Excuse me, David, I said quietly. He looked up immediately. Yes, Mr. Vance, is everything to your satisfaction, sir? I need to separate my check quietly, I said, keeping my tone entirely conversational. My table consists of 2 people, myself and my senior associate Maya. David didn't hesitate for a single second. Of course, Mr. Vance. What did your specific table have tonight? 2 bone-in ribeyes, 2 glasses of house Cabernet, 1 order of grilled asparagus, and 2 sparkling waters. Maya had a side salad. David tapped the screen on his register with swift, practiced fingers. That comes to $210 before tip. I pulled out my personal card and handed it to him. Run it for $260. Put $50 on the tip for our server. He had to endure my family for 3 hours. You are very kind, sir, David said, sliding the card through the terminal. The machine hummed softly, printed the receipt, and I signed it with a smooth stroke of my pen. I folded the customer copy neatly and slid it into the inside breast pocket of my coat. Now, I said, leaning in slightly, when you take the remaining balance back to the table, I want you to hand the folder directly to the man sitting at the head of the long table in the white shirt with the loosened tie. My brother, Marcus. David looked at me, a tiny, almost imperceptible flicker of approval flashing across his face. Understood, Mr. Vance. The remaining balance of $14,420 will be presented directly to him. Thank you, I said, and please keep security nearby when you deliver it. We always do for checks of this size, David replied smoothly. I walked back down the carpeted hallway, my leather dress shoes sinking into the runner. I could feel my pulse throbbing in my temples, but it wasn't the erratic pulse of fear or embarrassment anymore. It was the icy, focused calm of a man who had finally decided to stop letting parasites bleed him dry. I stepped back into the private dining room. The air was thick with the smell of expensive cigars, spilled wine, and unchecked ego. Nobody even paused their conversations when I walked in. Marcus was mid-sentence, loudly lying to one of his potential investors about his golf handicap. My father was loudly lecturing my uncle about property taxes. I sat back down in my chair next to Maya. Maya was my firm's lead structural engineer, a brilliant, sharp-witted woman who had come with me to what was supposed to be a small, 6-person dinner to celebrate a modest regional grant our firm had assisted on. Instead, Marcus had hijacked the reservation, invited 24 extra people, and turned it into his personal flexing arena. Under the table, Maya glanced at me, her dark eyes sharp. "Did you do it?" she whispered. "It's done," I murmured back, picking up my water glass and taking a slow sip. "They're going to lose their minds," she murmured with a faint, dangerous smile. "Let them," I said. At exactly 10:45 p.m., David walked into the room accompanied by our waiter and a burly floor manager. David carried the black leather bill folder in his hands like a quiet execution sentence. He bypassed me completely. He walked straight to the head of the table, stopped right beside Marcus, and set the open folder down on the table, directly over Marcus's cell phone. "Whenever you're ready, sir," David said in a clear, carrying voice that instantly cut through the room's noise. "The remaining balance for your party is $14,420. The silence that fell over the room was instant, absolute, and suffocating. It was so sudden you could hear the ice cubes melting in the cocktail shakers across the room. Marcus stopped mid-laugh, his mouth hanging open like a landed fish. He looked down at the black folder, then looked up at David, his face turning an unhealthy shade of purple. "What the hell is this?" Marcus spat out, his voice cracking. "I told you to give this to my brother, Julian." I took another slow, deliberate sip of my water, set the glass down with a soft clink, and looked across the table at him. "My table was 2 people, I said calmly. "I paid $260. My bill is settled." Marcus stared at me as if I had spoken to him in ancient Greek. "What?" he roared, shoving his chair back hard enough to scrape violently against the hardwood floor. "What do you mean your bill is settled?"
"You're the one with the corporate account. You're supposed to pay for the dinner."
My mother gasped, dropping her napkin onto her plate.
"Julian, stop this childish nonsense right now. You are embarrassing your brother in front of his business associates."
"No, Mom," I said, fixing her with a stare so cold she actually flinched. "What's childish is inviting 24 extra people to a 4-star restaurant, ordering $400 bottles of wine you can't afford, and assuming someone else is going to pick up the tab just because they have a respectable job." My father slammed his fist onto the mahogany table, making the wine glasses ring. "Listen to me, you arrogant little shit. You will hand over your credit card right now. Your brother is building a business. You owe this family." "I don't owe this family a single dollar," I said, leaning forward and resting my forearms on the table. "I paid for my mother's knee surgery 6 months ago. $15,000 that Marcus promised to split with me and never paid a dime toward. I paid $3,000 to bail Marcus out of his second DUI 3 years ago. I paid $8,000 for cousin Leah's college tuition when her father lost his job. And 2 weeks ago, Marcus, you called me, begging for $5,000 because your payroll check bounced." The entire room went utterly dead silent. Marcus's potential investors, 2 older men in tailored gray suits sitting across from Marcus, suddenly sat up very straight, their eyes darting between Marcus and me. Marcus's face went from purple to a ghostly, chalky white. "Shut up, Julian. Shut your mouth." "Why should I shut up?" I asked, my voice cutting through the room like a razor blade. "You sat here for 3 hours telling these gentlemen that your development company just secured a $10 million municipal permit for the waterfront project. You told them my architectural firm signed off on your structural safety filings." One of the investors, a gray-haired man named Richard, narrowed his eyes at Marcus. "Wait a minute. Marcus, you told us your brother's firm, Vance Urban Design, was the primary guarantor on the engineering permits." "He is," Marcus stammered, panic rising in his chest like a flood. "He's my brother. His firm is doing the oversight." I looked directly at Richard. "Sir, I am the founder and principal director of Vance Urban Design. My firm has never signed a contract with Marcus's company. In fact, 4 hours ago, at 4 o'clock this afternoon, my legal department issued a formal cease and desist letter to the city planning board because Marcus forged my professional signature on his preliminary zoning applications." The explosion in the room was immediate. Richard stood up so fast his leather chair nearly overturned. "You forged engineering permits?" he shouted at Marcus. "We gave you a $300,000 earnest deposit on Tuesday based on those filings." "It's a misunderstanding," Marcus shrieked, sweating profusely now, his hands shaking as he gestured wildly. "Julian is lying. He's just jealous because Dad always loved me more. He's trying to sabotage my career." "We're pulling our funding immediately," Richard said coldly, buttoning his jacket and looking at his partner. "And if our legal team confirms that signature was forged, you will be facing federal fraud charges by Monday morning, Marcus." "Wait, Richard, please, don't listen to him," Marcus pleaded, reaching out to grab Richard's arm, but the investor threw Marcus's hand off with utter disgust. While Marcus was panicking, David, the restaurant manager, stepped forward, his expression completely devoid of mercy. "Sir," David said to Marcus, his voice amplified by the sudden silence, "the remaining balance of $14,420 needs to be settled right now. How would you like to pay?" Marcus spun on David, his eyes wild. "I don't have $14,000 on my personal card. Put it on an invoice. Bill my company." "We do not invoice private dining parties," David replied calmly. "If the bill cannot be paid by someone present at this table within the next 10 minutes, we will be forced to contact the local police department and report a group theft of services." "Police?" my mother shrieked, clutching her chest. "Julian, do something. Pay the bill. You can't let your brother go to jail over a dinner." My father glided across the room toward me, his face twisted in pure, unadulterated rage. He pointed a thick, trembling finger at my face. "If you walk out of this room without paying this bill, Julian, you are dead to me. Do you hear me? You are no longer part of this family." I stood up slowly. I am 6'2". My father had to tilt his head back to look me in the eyes. For 38 years, I had feared his authority, feared his disapproval, and spent hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to purchase his respect. But looking at him now, a bitter, manipulative old man trying to bully me into funding his golden child's criminal lifestyle, I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no regret, just complete, liberating freedom. "Dad," I said, my voice low and completely steady. "I stopped being part of this family the day I realized you only invited me to dinners when you needed someone to pay for them." I turned to Maya. "Let's go." "Julian, don't you dare walk out that door," my mother screamed, her voice cracking into an unsightly shriek. "Julian, you cowardly piece of shit," Marcus roared, lunging toward me. But David and the burly floor manager instantly stepped between us, blocking Marcus's path with imposing physical presence. "Sir, keep your hands to yourself or you will be restrained immediately," the floor manager warned Marcus in a dark tone. Maya and I walked past them, out of the private room and down the quiet, carpeted hallway of the restaurant. Behind us, the room descended into utter chaos. I could hear Cousin Leah arguing with her husband about who was going to pay for their $500 wine, my mother crying hysterically, Richard shouting about his lawyers, and Marcus screaming at the manager. We stepped out through the grand double-glass doors of the Obsidian Steakhouse and into the cool, damp night air. The city streets were slick with recent rain, reflection lights stretching across the dark asphalt. I took a deep, long breath. The air tasted clean. Maya looked over at me as we waited by the valet stand. "Are you all right?" she asked quietly. I looked at the city sky, feeling a massive, invisible weight that I had carried since childhood slide off my shoulders and crash into the pavement. "I'm better than I've ever been in my life," I said. My phone started buzzing in my pocket before the valet even brought my car around. It wasn't just one text, it was a violent, relentless barrage of notifications. My mother: "You are an ungrateful monster. Your brother is in tears. How could you do this to your own blood? Call me right now." My father: "You humiliated us in front of influential people. You ruined Marcus's life tonight. You will fix this tomorrow morning or don't ever speak to us again." Marcus sent 4 separate voice notes. I didn't even play the first 3. I tapped the 4th one. His voice was frantic, slurred, and laced with pure terror. "Julian, you bastard. The restaurant made everyone at the table throw in their credit cards. They maxed out my card. They took $3,000 from Dad. They made Aunt Sarah pay $1,200. Richard walked out and told the press he's dropping the waterfront project. You destroyed my life. I'm going to sue you for slander. I deleted the voice notes, opened my contacts, and placed my mother, my father, and Marcus on complete block. The valet brought my black sedan around. I tipped him $20, opened the door for Maya,
and got into the driver's seat. As I pulled out into the night traffic, the city lights streaming past my windshield, I realized something fundamental about human nature. Parasites don't love you for who you are. They love you for what they can extract from you. The moment you set a firm, unyielding boundary, they don't respect your strength. They hate you for depriving them of their host. Over the next 72 hours, the fallout from that dinner exploded across my family's entire social circle.
On Monday morning, I arrived at my firm's headquarters on the 34th floor of the downtown financial tower. At 9:15 a.m., my assistant informed me that a man was downstairs in the lobby causing a scene, demanding to be led up to my executive suite. It was Marcus. I told security to allow him up under the condition that 2 building security guards accompanied him to my corner office. When the elevator doors opened, Marcus looked like he hadn't slept or showered in 3 days. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his hair was greasy, and his eyes were bloodshot. The arrogant, smug contractor from Saturday night had completely vanished, replaced by a desperate, cornered animal.
"Julian,"
he choked out as he burst into my office, waving a handful of legal documents.
"you have to pull the cease and desist letter. You have to tell the city planning board that it was all a technical error."
I sat behind my desk, my hands folded calmly on the polished glass surface.
It wasn't a technical error, Marcus.
You scanned my professional architectural stamp from an old residential blueprint I drew for you 6 years ago, vectorized it, and placed it on commercial engineering documents for a building you aren't qualified to build. I was going to hire your firm once the funding went through, Marcus yelled, his voice cracking with desperation. I was going to pay you a huge consultant fee. I was just cutting through the municipal red tape to secure the initial $300,000 deposit from Richards Group. That is called felony wire fraud and forgery, Marcus, I said coldly. They're investigating me, Julian, he cried out, leaning both palms on my desk. The city district attorney's office called my office this morning. If you don't sign an affidavit saying you authorized me to use your seal, I am going to prison. Do you understand what that means? Your own brother in prison. I stared at him for a long, quiet moment. For years, every time Marcus got into trouble, my parents would sit me down and tell me that as the older, more successful brother, it was my duty to shield him from the consequences of his actions. When he crashed his first car into a neighbor's fence at 19, I was forced to say I was steering. When he got kicked out of trade school for cheating, I was forced to pay for his private certification courses. They had raised me to be his permanent cushion, his unpaid legal defense, and his endless bank account. Marcus, I said softly. He looked up, a tiny ray of false hope flashing in his bloodshot eyes. Yes? You'll sign it? If you don't leave this building in 30 seconds, I said, I am going to dial the lead detective on the municipal fraud squad and hand them the original email records showing you attempted to bribe my junior associate last month to leak our firm's structural files. Marcus froze. The color drained from his face entirely. You wouldn't. Try me, I said, picking up my desk phone receiver. He stared at me, realizing for the very first time in his life that his emotional blackmail had zero power over me. The illusion was completely shattered. He backed away from my desk slowly, his mouth twitching, shaking his head in absolute disbelief. You're a cold-hearted monster, he hissed. Family means nothing to you. Family means everything to me, I replied, setting the receiver back down. Which is why I refuse to let a criminal destroy the reputation and business I built with 15 years of hard work. Security escorted him out of the building. 2 weeks later, the municipal board officially canceled Marcus's development license. Richard and his investment group filed a civil lawsuit against Marcus's shell company to recover their $300,000, and the city prosecutor formally opened a grand jury investigation into his permit filings. My father tried to visit my house once, standing on my front porch for 20 minutes, ringing the doorbell. I watched him through my security camera. He looked smaller, older, and tired, but I didn't open the door. Because I knew he wasn't there to apologize. He was there to ask for $100,000 to pay for Marcus's defense attorney. When he realized I wasn't opening the door, he left a handwritten note in my mailbox that read, "You broke your mother's heart. Money has corrupted your soul." I folded the note, walked over to my fireplace, and tossed it into the flames. It has been 6 months since that $14,000 dinner at the Obsidian Steakhouse. My life has become extraordinarily quiet, immensely productive, and completely peaceful. Without the constant late-night emergency phone calls, the guilt-inducing family demands, and the endless financial drains, my architecture firm has had its most profitable quarter in history. I spent last weekend sitting on the balcony of my new lake house, a property I bought with the exact money I used to waste on funding my family's reckless lifestyles. The water was still as glass, reflecting the clear blue sky. Maya came up for the weekend with her husband, and we sat on the porch, drinking coffee, listening to the birds, talking about our firm's new museum design project. My brother thought he was trapping me that night at the restaurant. He thought that by inviting 26 people, getting them drunk on vintage wine, and putting me on the spot in front of wealthy investors, he could force me to submit to his entitlement one last time. He didn't realize that he was handing me the greatest gift of my life. He gave me the exact reason I needed to finally stand up, pay my $210, and walk away from their circus forever. Freedom doesn't always come from a dramatic victory. Sometimes, freedom is just a simple, uncompromising word spoken across a restaurant table. No.